Bills Mafia. On tonight's Air Raid Hour, we will be breaking down all things Bills Jets, plus peeking ahead to next week's game against the Philadelphia Eagles. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. And I'll tell you what, Dave, who were the dummies who scheduled this show for 9 p.m. when we have quite literally one of the games of the year on Monday Night Football right now with the Chiefs going up against the Eagles, and on top of it being one of the games of the year on paper on the schedule, it's the Buffalo Bills' next two opponents. So I think a lot of Bills Mafia are going to be self-scouting this evening, as the last I checked, it was a 7-7 tie on Monday Night Football. But we are here, myself live from my parents' basement and you from your adult home, to talk about the Buffalo Bills beating the New York Jets. Caden K comes in and says, overreaction, the Bills are back. I don't think that's an overreaction at all. We're going to talk about it this evening, but the vibes were real in this game, and the Buffalo Bills looked to be their old, confident self. And RJ Melville comes in and says, so I think I was correct about Dorsey. A lot of positive things from Joe Brady last night, but maybe we should, be patient and collect a little bit more of a sample size before we make any decisions about the future for the Buffalo Bills at offensive coordinator and any other positions on the Buffalo Bills coaching staff. But Bills 32, Jets 6, most points scored on the Jets in 2 years. First wide receiver, Khalil Shakir, that is, to get a touchdown on this Jets defense since Stefon Diggs did it in week 1. People were getting mad. Like, I was in the stands. I was at Highmark Stadium. People were getting mad that the Buffalo Bills were kicking field goals in the first quarter. And I was like, everybody settle down. Like, this is an upper echelon, borderline elite defense that the Buffalo Bills are going up against. Points will be at a premium this evening. Take them while you can get them. I was not mad at all when Sean McDermott set out the field goal unit to go up 9-0, because as you said pregame, that's an insurmountable lead with the way the Jets play offense. So not a bad start for Joe Brady's tenure as offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, and I think the whole thing is taking the field goals against that defense. You have to couple that with the fact of how bad the Jets offense is, right? So you think about how good the Jets defense is, and then that combined with how badly the Jets have struggled on offense. They were 0 for 11 in third down in this game, but they were the worst third down team coming into this game, now even worse than they were coming in. So a field goal against that team kind of feels like a touchdown to me, right? With the fact that their defense is that good and their offense is that bad. 9-0, going up 9-0, any 2-possession lead against that Jets team is going to feel pretty insurmountable and pretty daunting for that Jets offense to try to come back from. So not mad at all, especially in the early stages of the game, taking field goals.
It was so funny. Jets 0 for 11 on third down. They were 4 for 5 on fourth down, but 0 for 11 on third down. And there was one point in the game where there was like a curl route, and I can't remember who caught it. Probably Alan Lazard, I think. And Rasul Douglas got called for the DPI. And it would have been short of the sticks, but they gave him the first down because of the defensive pass interference. And Tony Romo's like, no, give him credit for that third down. You got to give him credit. Like, that's the first down that they just picked up. Like, they've been struggling on third down. Give him the third down.
He was short.
On the stat sheet. He was short, but the penalty gave him the first down.
Yes. Yeah,
Tony Romo felt so bad for the Jets offense that he was like, on the statistics sheet, put that they were 1 for 11, because like that should count. That's how down bad the Jets are or have been on offense as of late. And one of the other things before we get into our biggest takeaway and I apologize if this is this is your biggest takeaway, but I want to talk about vibes a little bit because that was a big story all week going in, right? Like Joe Brady, positive attitude, bringing different vibes, trying to get this team to play more confident, quicker football. The vibes I felt like were real in this football game, and I don't want to dismiss people who want to credit vibes with being an important part of a football team because I've played on sports teams, definitely not at the level that these guys are playing at the National Football League. I've coached competitive sports throughout my entire adulthood. Vibes very much are real. Like when you have a positive vibe, when you're winning, when you have momentum, it affects focus, it affects energy, it affects your intensity and the speed with which you play. And the vibes were back for the Buffalo Bills last night in all three phases. And it really started up front with Reggie Gilliam forcing that fumble. Then you saw 4 turnovers and 6 sacks from the defense. And then you saw an offense against a very, very good defense score 3 touchdowns. Like the vibes very much were back, and it was good. I think of all the things that we saw yesterday, it was good to see Josh Allen acting like his old self. I mean, as silly as it sounds, cutting the hair, right? Going back to the fade, getting a haircut, right? The celebrations that he had with his teammates, getting amped up, getting energized again. Literally, at one point on the sidelines, caught because he was mic'd up for that CW series they do inside the NFL. Literally saying, hey, I'm back, baby, I'm back.
Mhm.
And then he gave his, his always smug and confident and cocky "Go Bills" in his exit video that the Bills media camera had set up. So the vibes were strong with the team last night, and the vibes were strong with Josh Allen.
Yeah, and I mean, you start thinking about like what are the biggest takeaways from this game, and I mean, there's quite a few, right?
Mhm.
But I think at the top of the list, you have to say with everything that happened this past week that the change in offensive coordinator is probably at the top of the list, right? I mean, there are a lot of things that went
Mhm.
well, really in all three phases. You know, Tyler Bass got back on track, made 4 field goals. I know he missed the extra point, but an extra point. The defense, 6 sacks in this game, but ultimately at the end of the day, there was a
Mhm.
deliberate sort of intent from this offense. There were some things that we saw play calling wise that we hadn't
Mhm.
seen, that mesh concept to the running back that the 49ers like to run with McCaffrey on the Cook touchdown, some things to Kincaid. And then, you couple that with some of
Mhm.
the highlights from some of the trade deadline acquisition, right?
Mhm.
Of Rasul Douglas getting the 2 interceptions. So as far as for me, I think the biggest takeaway is maybe just the collective
Mhm.
confidence and just like aura around the team that
Mhm.
kind of like came out in this game and then obviously culminated to the end of it. And this is the kind of swagger, I'll say, and aura that's been
Yeah.
around this team when they've been playing their best. So it was a momentum change in the vibes, as you put it, for the
Mhm.
better. And look, I'm not saying I don't know if it's going to last. We don't know. But at
Yeah.
least for 1 week, like the Bills
Mhm.
seem to have like righted course as far as, okay, some of the negative attention that's been put on the team, the negative energy surrounding the Dorsey firing, the negative energy around the offense and the injuries and all that has at least subsided for 1 week.
Yeah. All right. Before we move on, this show is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Western New York. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. Head on over to picassospizza.net. And I will tell you what, Dave, I was in the stadium eating Lenovo pizza because that's what they have in the stadium. I was eating Lenovo pizza, and the entire time I was just pretending it was Picasso's. I'm just close your eyes, pretend it's Picasso's. That's what you got to do. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. But head on over to picassospizza.net and get all of your Buffalo pizza needs met. All right. So I didn't mean to throw you off. I just wanted to have a vibes talk before we
Oh,
got
yeah.
to biggest takeaways. And I think you might have given away your biggest takeaway, but maybe just speak a little bit more on it. What was your singular biggest takeaway from the game? And then we'll get to some of the people in the comment section, like Circling the Wagons, who says the biggest takeaway from him, the Bills are still in the hunt and there is still hope.
Yeah, I mean, I think the hope, like, again, talk about like a lot
Mhm.
of like, there's a lot of positives from this game, right? So for me, I think just
Yeah.
the kind of the last point I made, and I won't spend too long on it because I already kind of hit on it, was just like the reversal of momentum, right? From the negatives
Mhm.
that surrounded this team after the Denver Broncos loss to the Dorsey firing to the negatives around the offense as a whole. Continuing to talk about the injuries, McDermott, the whole McDermott press conference, and people kind of getting on him about like, his sort of level of accountability to himself and has he lost the locker room,
Mhm.
et cetera, et cetera. And at least for one game, it certainly looked like this team was unified, right? And I think that's key. That was a big takeaway for me. The team looked unified. The team looked like they were ready to go to battle for each other. There was energy and it was
Mhm.
positive energy. And I think for me, at least again for 1 week, that is the biggest takeaway. As you start to head, really, this Jets game was that game you
Mhm.
needed that to happen. Because as you start to head into this next stretch of games, the bye week aside, you need
Yep.
that, right? You need that against this schedule that you have coming up.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, all three phases. To me, complementary football is a real thing, and that was my biggest takeaway. Joe Brady was asked today in his press conference by the media, what was the biggest difference for the Bills offense versus the Jets? And we're going to talk about a million different things tonight, right? We're going to talk about more motion. We're going to talk about more under center. We're going to talk about utilizing the running backs. We're going to talk all these different things we're going to talk about tonight. These these subtle things that Joe Brady did differently. His answer in the press conference was Reggie Gilliam's first play of the game. Like, that's what Joe, because it really just kickstarted this entire football game and it put the Buffalo Bills in positive field position. So it really goes to what Sean McDermott preaches week in and week out, and which the Buffalo Bills hadn't been doing week in and week out. And a lot of people don't want to hear this word, but the Buffalo Bills played some really good complementary football against the New York Jets. And in the pregame show, we talked about three things that the Buffalo Bills would need to do: have good average starting field position,
Mhm,
have fewer turnovers and force some turnovers, and win time of possession. And I
mhm.
said, whatever team does two of those three things, has the better average starting field position, has the most turnovers, has the most time of possession, whoever does two of those three things will win this football game. The Buffalo Bills did three out of those three things, and they won this football game. Average starting field position for the Buffalo Bills, the 38-yard line. For the New York Jets, it was the 22. Turnovers. The Jets turned the ball over 4 times. The
Mm.
Bills only turned the ball over once, and it was kind of a
It was
meaningless
a
turnover.
it was a BS turnover, yeah.
And then time of possession. Buffalo Bills, almost 37 minutes
Mhm,
compared to the New York Jets, 23. That is 3 out of 3 in terms of playing good complementary football. Over the 6-week stretch where the Buffalo Bills went 2-4 and they were really up against it and they were really struggling, they were getting torched in these three categories. So it was nice to see all three phases coming together and getting a dub. That was my biggest takeaway in this football game.
yeah, except for Sam Martin continues to stink, but other than that,
He had
uh,
one, I think, like inside the 10,
yeah,
but
yeah. I mean, it was nice. Remember it was 2 years ago where Bass had
Mhm.
that game against the Jets where he kicked, like, 5 or 6 field goals, and it kinda, like, got him on track for the rest of the season. Like, he was 4 for 4 on field goals, 2 for 3 on extra points, but 4 for 4 on field goals on some tough kicks as well, so nice
Yeah.
little momentum for Tyler Bass, I think, going into this stretch as well.
All right, let's shift our focus now to the Buffalo Bills offense, and let's have our conversation start there. The way I say, I figure we have this conversation tonight because I think almost everything we talk about is going to be centered around Joe Brady. So I figured maybe me and you and the people in the comment section, we can all just go back and forth and just pick out things that we enjoyed seeing from Joe Brady in his first game as offensive coordinator, things we liked from the offense, and we'll just go and we'll just very free flowing conversation here. So, Dave, I'll start with you and then we'll look to the comment section. What is one thing that you saw from Joe Brady that you really enjoyed from this Buffalo Bills offense?
Yeah, so just start with something I posted on Twitter earlier today. I
Mhm,
think going into the game, we had talked about how tough the Jets defense was going to be, but we did also talk about that they did have a slight weakness in defending running backs in the passing game, and you saw the Bills
mhm,
utilize James Cook and Ty Johnson, which by the way, that's a part of what I liked as well, in the passing game more, right? And we had said James Cook's targets and catches had kind of dwindled over the past 4 games where they were higher the first 4 or 5 games of the season.
mhm,
That comes back. You see the running backs combined for 6 catches, 76 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns from the running backs. So I really liked the utilization of the backs in the passing game. And to go along with that on that same note, the utilization of Ty Johnson um,
mhm.
being a real factor in this game as a weapon. And so
Yeah.
you start to think ahead and you think about what the Bills have in the cupboard for running backs between Cook and Ty Johnson and Murray and Fournette, and you have a really nice group there
Mhm.
to kind of get you through this stretch of the season. And so for me, that showed a lot of promise. And I think for me, the utilization of the running backs in the passing game, and then obviously this will be a topic as well, the running game. But I'll start with that. I'll start with the running
Yeah.
backs in the passing game as we kind of go around the table here.
Yeah, no, I'm all with you too because I mean the Buffalo Bills clearly had a game plan, and that game plan was to utilize any former New York Jet against their team because they unleashed Ty Johnson in this game. They just let Shaq Lawson pin his ear back. Shaq Lawson had some big plays in this game. They're like every former Jet, let's just get you onto the football field. That was clearly part of the Buffalo Bills game plan. But I mean, you mentioned it, getting the running backs involved. Josh Allen said, "I can't get bored with the easy stuff." And Joe Brady not only made it a point of emphasis to get the ball into the hands of the running backs, but hammered it home to Josh Allen to make those decisions to dump it down. I think the Ty Johnson one over the middle of the football field, where Ty Johnson was able to catch it, turn the field, and run. Weeks past, we see Josh Allen double clutch that ball, look to go down the field with it, force it down the field. No, he gave it to Ty Johnson. Ty Johnson turned. Ty Johnson picked up a first down. He got the ball into James Cook's hands and got James Cook into space. He did a lot of good things, and the 2 touchdowns were great, right? Because this might even be a different conversation, and this might be something we see more of over the next couple of weeks, not just on the goal line or not just in these 4th and 1 situations. Hopefully we see this all over the offense and built all into the offense, but scheming guys open, right? Like that's the one thing where we felt like Ken Dorsey really was flawed. Picking a guy, creating a play that's just going to get a guy open. A lot of it was, man, the Bills need easy separators. The Bills need quick separators. The Bills need guys who can naturally separate because that's what the offense needed. Here now you have Joe Brady, who's literally scheming up plays where James Cook is wide open, catches the ball, and runs in the end zone, right? Ty
Mhm.
Johnson catches the ball with a head of steam with nobody in front of him, is able to run into the end zone. He had to do a little bit of work toe tapping the sideline. He was putting players in a position to gain those yards after the catch to make big plays. It wasn't naturally like those players were creating the separation. Those players were getting themselves open. They were getting schemed open, which is something I feel like we didn't really see a lot of from Ken Dorsey.
Yeah, I agree, and I think, like, that's the point of sort
Mhm.
of how we talk about getting some of the confidence back as well, right? Is easy completions are a natural confidence booster,
Mhm.
right? And getting these backs involved in the passing game, to me, that's one thing for them to get schemed open, and then Josh then pulling the trigger, right? And being
Yeah.
decisive and saying, "That's where I'm going with this ball. The guy's wide open. I'm gonna make that quick decision, get the ball out, and that's
Mhm.
really, as a couple people have mentioned in the comments section, 1, 2 reads and go. A lot of these were his first option, and he's just getting rid of the ball. And I think,
Mhm.
as we talked about in the pregame, part of what Ken Dorsey's issue was like trying to have like a counter for every possible scenario. And you don't need that all the time, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes simple is better. Making the mental aspect of the game simpler is better, even
Mhm.
though maybe schematically you had a counter for everything. The mental aspect of it was clearly draining and affecting the execution. So you saw better
Mhm.
execution obviously in this game and getting the backs involved. Those are easy throws to make, right? And so as long as you're
Mhm.
decisive and doing it quickly, you give those guys a chance to make something happen after the catch.
Yeah. James Cook, I mean, Shout out to him too. 17 carries for 73 yards. It was nice to see a running back getting 17 carries in a game. Talk about balance. We got towards the end, we fed the running backs because that's what the score dictated, and we were able to still pick up yards. That was also really nice to see. But then James Cook also added 3 catches for 29 yards and a touchdown. He's the third leading rusher in the NFL right now. And the other point is, you mentioned Leonard Fournette. Everyone's expecting playoff Lenny to come in and to be a part of this football team. But now Ty Johnson gets his run. Ty Johnson looks good. Who knows what this could mean for the future of Leonard Fournette? Maybe it could eat into Latavius Murray's carries. Latavius Murray only, right? I mean this in the nicest way possible because he was the guy who had to do some of the dirty work late. Only averaged 3.5 yards per carry compared to some of those other backs. So maybe you see a situation in the next couple of weeks where, like, as crazy as it sounds, Latavius Murray is inactive and like Leonard Fournette is active. So who knows if the Buffalo Bills just want Leonard Fournette as a break glass in case of emergency, or they legitimately see a role for him. That'll be really interesting to see how it plays out over the next couple of weeks. A couple of people mentioned in the comment section, I believe it was Pops Mafia. He said, it's crazy that the middle of the field was not a place we wanted to throw. And that's the next thing I want to talk about here. Legitimately, if you look at the NFL next gen passing charts that people always post on social media after the games that show, if you put the Jets game in week 11 next to the Jets game from week 1, the difference in all the green dots over the middle of the field is absolutely insane. Now, in reality, it was 6 passes over the middle of the field compared to 2 passes. But that's a big difference, not just because you're completing and looking over the middle of the field, but all 6 of those passes attempted over the middle of the field were completed. You're a threat over the middle of the football field, which makes defenses have to play you differently and opens stuff up for you if you want to try and go east and west.
Yeah, and look, I know people talking about like the middle of the field being open, but like the Jets have 2 really excellent linebackers. And by the way, both graded out super high from a coverage grading perspective too by PFF for the season, number 2 and number 3 respectively in coverage grades. For the Bills to have 6 completions on 6 attempts over the middle, really impressive. On that note, Dalton Kincaid's ability to feel the defender's leverage. I mean, Pro Ant's been doing a good job putting that film out, but that was something that I had kind of felt had been the case, and then seeing him kind of break that down on the film is really nice to see. Just like that ability to kind of sense the defender around you when you're in the middle of the field, and to get upfield for that extra yardage is impressive. Because when you're on the sideline, when you're near the sideline, there's really only one option, right? You go back to the middle of the field and potentially probably get tackled, or you go out of bounds. But when you're in the middle of the field, you have a little bit more room to be creative with the yards after catch. So that's another benefit, I think, of leveraging the middle of the field, especially because in reality, like, the Bills are going to be coming up against some teams where they're going to have that kind of matchup that they're going to need to leverage. And so, yeah, that was nice to see. Definitely. By the way, James Cook, 17 carries in this game, tied for his most on the season. Only other time he had 17 carries this year was in the Raiders game in a blowout. So pretty nice to see that.
You mentioned Dalton Kincaid, and he had a big first half, 6 catches for 46 yards. You mentioned his ability to use leverage, his ability to gain yards after the catch. He was a clutch chain mover in this football game. It felt like in the first half, whenever we needed a chunk play, Dalton Kincaid was the guy the Buffalo Bills could look to in order to get that chunk play. Some really good statistics here. And of course, if it's a really good statistic, it's not something that I pulled. So I have to give credit to some people here. Mr. Snow, who I know watches the show, is often in the comment section. You can also find him on Twitter. He did the math. Since the Giants game, Dalton Kincaid has averaged 6.8 catches a game. If you were to extrapolate that over the course of a full season, that's 115 catches, which would be 5 more catches than Travis Kelce had last year at 110. So Dalton Kincaid has been getting fed since Dawson Knox went on to injured reserve. And he, within a year or two, could be a top 2-3 tight end And Travis Kelce is on his podcast talking about how, listen, guys, I'm closer to retirement than you all think I am. We could be a scenario where the baton could be passed within the next year or two from a guy like Travis Kelce to a guy like Dalton Kincaid. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here, but the Buffalo Bills could have just an absolutely major steal in the first round in Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah, major steal. I know doesn't really mean much in real life, but even if you look at sort of like how things have been trending in the fantasy football world, right? Like the fantasy rankings over the last few weeks have seen a guy like Dalton Kincaid bust into the top 4 or 5 tight ends for fantasy football, which tells you that he is getting meaningful yardage. He's scored obviously in the game prior, right, against Tampa Bay. And so he is coming on. And I do think that it's going to be interesting to see how the Bills incorporate Knox back into the offense when he comes back. Because the one thing that you sometimes worry about is like there's no pressure. Well, not on now it's on Joe Brady, but there was no pressure to like try to like appease both guys at the same position before, right? And an offense where you already got to feed Diggs, you got to try to get Davis his targets here and there, and obviously talk about that in a second, and the backs in the passing game. But it's going to be maybe a challenge or something Joe Brady needs to think about when Dawson Knox comes back is what is going to be the best way to get him back integrated, because you also don't want to mess with a good thing if you've got something good working.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, there are a lot of people who might be concerned with Dawson Knox coming back. I'm not one of those people. I look forward to Dawson.
The more weapons we have back, the better. Honestly, I agree.
And to be like, if you look at it, people in the comment section too, this was going to be one of the next things we get to was the use of under center, right? We saw a ton of David Edwards in this game, and we saw a ton of Quentin Morris in this game. And we saw the Buffalo Bills had some success running with Quentin Morris on the field and Dalton Kincaid off of the field. So whether it's using 12 personnel or taking Dalton Kincaid off the field when we want to do some running things without making it too obvious, right? There's a role for Dawson Knox on this football team. Is it a role in which he's worth $11 million a year? Probably not. But the Buffalo Bills are settled with that contract for at least 2 more years. And Dawson Knox is probably a top 15 to 20 tight end in the National Football League. And I might be understating that. So bringing him back into this offense, as long as you do it without taking away from what Dalton Kincaid has been doing, that's going to be a plus addition to this offense because of all of the hats that Dawson Knox wears and all of the things he does for this offense that we don't see. So a lot of that stuff that David Edwards is providing, that Quentin Morris is providing right now, that we maybe like, we're going to give David Edwards his flowers today because he was on the field a ton and he helped in the run game. We're going to give Quentin Morris his flowers today because of the way he helped us with that big pin and pull run. Dawson Knox has been doing all those things for years, right? So when he comes back, you're adding all that element, and then he's a better pass catcher on top of it because he's on an offensive lineman. So I'm really looking forward to Dawson Knox coming back and our ability to continue to be versatile on offense. And that was one of the things, like Eric, we used a word today to describe Joe Brady and his play calling. It was shape-shifting. There's a great video on Cover One that Eric has posted. He went into the lab. He broke down Joe Brady's first game. It's an awesome video. I highly suggest after this is over, to go into the Cover One video section and to watch that video that Eric did where he broke down Joe Brady in his first game as play caller, and he used that phrase, shape-shifting. And when you get Dawson Knox back, you can shape-shift even more. You can shape-shift into 12 personnel. You can shape-shift into things where Dalton Kincaid is flanked out as a wide receiver and Dawson Knox is in line. You can do a lot of different things, and you can have a lot of tools in your toolbox, and this offense can be highly, highly successful even when Dawson Knox comes back. So if people are out there sweating Dawson Knox coming back, I wouldn't, unless the Buffalo Bills get way too crazy when he gets back and try to overcorrect to get him back onto the football field.
Yeah, I mean, and the Bills can be in a unique position, right? Where, and we talked about this at the beginning of the season with Kincaid and Knox, where there aren't a ton of teams right now that are really truly using two tight ends as offensive weapons, right?
Mhm.
Think around the league. Like, I honestly can't think of a team off the top of my head that's really using two tight ends a lot in the passing game.
Mhm.
Maybe you saw that a little bit last night with Oliver and Hawkinson on the Viking, but like it's not to the extent that the Bills potentially could
Mhm.
use with Knox and Kincaid. So they could be in a really unique position. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I agree with Renaissance Man. Too many weapons is a beautiful problem to have. And I don't think Joe Brady is going to be complaining when he gets Dawson
Mhm.
Knox back either. It's just going to be a matter of like you don't want to necessarily mess with a good thing if you got something good
Mhm.
going, but you do need to have optionality and, like you said, shape shifting. So um, I definitely look forward to that when he's back.
How about Khalil Shakir too? So let's talk about
Mm.
Khalil Shakir for a moment. I mean, 3 catches, 115 yards, a touchdown. He was my wild card player of the game. I wanted to get him the ball, give him the ball in space. Now, Joe Brady didn't use him the way I suggested and when I made my wild card statement, but he certainly put an emphasis on getting Khalil Shakir the ball more. And again, he finished with 3 catches for 115 yards and a touchdown. That insane 81-yard play. That
Mm.
play literally had everything from the Josh Allen throw, which was just absolutely silly to do that flat-footed and to be able to beat a guy reacting like Sauce Gardner. The yards after the catch from Khalil Shakir to turn and to make that run. Dalton Kincaid knocking 3 guys out of the play with his butt. Like that was awesome. And then I don't know if you noticed this one day, but if you go back and watch it on elite replay, Ed Oliver has a great celebration going on the sideline the entire time
I saw that.
that
Yeah, I
Khalil
saw that.
Shakir is running into the end zone. So literally, like Stefon used to say on those SNL skits, this play literally had everything. Like it had everything. It was an insane play. Definitely the play of the game from this game.
Play of the game, because if you think about it,
Mm-hmm.
a fraction less zip on that ball, it could be intercepted, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest. Like, I mean, let's be realistic about it. A fraction less zip on that ball, and that could be intercepted or at least knocked down. But you're talking about a guy that
Mm-hmm.
maybe the only guy in the NFL that could get enough zip on that ball. There's maybe two other guys,
Mm-hmm.
maybe Justin Herbert or like he'd probably be the only other guy I could think that could get the zip on that ball that he did to get it past Sauce Gardner, right? Because that was a tight throw when you look at it from
Mm-hmm.
really any of the angles you see other than the broadcast angle. The broadcast angle really didn't even do it justice on how tight of a window that was. And then the yards after
Mm-hmm.
catch, obviously, in a game like that where that puts you up. I think that was the one that put him up, right? 29? That was to get to 29. I mean, at that point, the game was over, right? Like you knew that
Mm-hmm.
you knew the game was over and it was just celebration. The celebration was on. But Shakir really been like not necessarily known coming out or like scouted to come out as like that explosive type of guy. He was more of like
Mm-hmm.
kind of the route running, sort of make a little bit happen after the catch, sneak through a few defenders and kind of get yards after contact after catch. But he's really been
Yeah.
kind of the big play threat, and he's
Four,
taken
four,
that a mantle from Gabe Davis.
four,
I
four,
would say,
four at the
right?
combine. We were
Yeah.
both, when we did the pre-draft coverage, shocked by the 40 time that he ran. Not that that's everything. And then we were double shocked when that 4.40 he ran didn't translate into him being drafted way higher. He was actually under drafted. So very weird pre-draft process for Khalil Shakir. One stat, and I'm going to get to this comment from Renaissance Man because I think it's a really good comment. And this one was from our guy Uber Hansen. So you probably already heard this on the Cover One Roundup tonight. But Uber went in and he looked at the top 20 players in the National Football League in catch percentage, right? The number of catches compared to the number of times you are targeted. Now, this is not a be-all, end-all stat. It is lacking in a lot of context. But when you have the top 20 guys and 18 of the top 20 guys are running backs, that makes sense. The higher percentage throws, right, go to the running backs, the dump offs, things like that. So there's more likely going to be a higher catch percentage for a running back. There are 2 non-running backs in the top 20 of catch percentage this year. Who are the 2 non-running backs? Wide receiver Khalil Shakir and tight end Dalton Kincaid. So not only they might not be getting targeted as much as we want them to be targeted. Dalton Kincaid obviously is more now, but they are catching almost every single thing that is thrown at them. And they are making the most out of the targets they are receiving. So that is just some really good I don't know, it's very positive moving forward that we have these two pieces in Khalil Shakir, and then obviously guy we've been talking about all show in Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah, and it kind of, if you think somewhat into the future, right? And I don't know what's going to happen with Gabe Davis, and I know you're about to bring the comment up from
Yeah.
Renaissance Man. If you start to think about the future, right? And I said it on Twitter yesterday too, like there's the question of whether it will be Deontay Hardy or Khalil Shakir in the slot coming into the season. You did give Deontay Hardy a decent amount of change. You thought maybe it would be him. Didn't really see what Shakir could truly be last year. To me, that debate has kind of been settled. It seems like Shakir really is the slot, at least of the foreseeable future. So you start talking about him, Kincaid, Diggs, and Cook, not to mention Knox. Like that's 5 guys right there you have under contract, right? And where does that leave Gabe Davis? So maybe now is a good time to bring that comment up.
Yeah. So Renaissance Man comes in and says, Gabe not only had no catches last night, but he had no targets. It's also the 4th game of the season with 1 or less catches. Is it time for Khalil Shakir to be wide receiver number 2? And to me, my question for you, Renaissance Man, and you can answer it in the comment section, is I'm gonna leave this comment up, is what do you mean by wide receiver number 2? Because if what you mean is that Khalil Shakir should go and he should take Gabe Davis' spot on the field and play the boundary as your typical like Z or flanker, the answer is no. He should not be your wide receiver number 2. But if the answer is that he should be the second most targeted wide receiver on the football team, he is, if you don't count Dalton Kincaid as a wide receiver. You label him as a tight end. It's Diggs, and then it is Shakir. No one on this football team outside of Trent Sherfield can do what Gabriel Davis does and provide what Gabriel Davis does on the boundary. I don't think there's any other receiver outside of obviously Stefon Diggs, who's our number 1 alpha, who can play the boundary like Gabriel Davis does in a professional manner, a way that, back when we had John Brown and Cole Beasley, what did we always complain about? Who's across from John Brown? There's not a guy who's literally has the ability to play the boundary. Gabe Davis is really the only one on this football team with the ability to consistently play the boundary. But Khalil Shakir is the slot guy. I think Khalil Shakir is probably going to be your second most targeted wide receiver going forward behind Stefon Diggs. I think the ultimate question, though, and I don't mean to run on here, is if you're looking for a guy like if Stefon Diggs gets hurt, here's our number 1. Oh, Stefon Diggs gets completely taken away. Here's another guy with alpha capabilities. That doesn't exist on this roster. I think Khalil Shakir is a very good player and is going to play a very good role on this team. Hell, I think Gabriel Davis is a very good player, and he fills a role on this football team. Probably not enough to pay him in the offseason. But if you're looking for like someone to take the mantle from Diggs someday, that's going to be the guy you have to draft in the first round of this year's draft. And I've been talking about that on social media for a year and a half now, 2 years. So there's a lot of layers to this. And I think you in the comment section, Renaissance Man said like second most targeted, 100%. I think Khalil Shakir is right now the second most targeted wide receiver. I think if I haven't got a chance to go back and look, but I think if you go back and look, he probably has been the second most targeted pure receiver since maybe the Giants game. So Dave, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, I think one thing I would say is it may not be, it may not be the case every week, right? I feel like you're gonna have weeks where it's Shakir. You're gonna have weeks where it's Gabe Davis. Obviously, Gabe Davis isn't necessarily trending in that direction, but like you have to remember still that, I mean, I know Josh Allen threw the ball 32 times, 32 pass attempts, but Shakir still only had the 4 targets, right? So I do think I agree with this comment as well. Kincaid to be the wide receiver 2 as far as like the second most targeted player on the offense. And then I think after that, it becomes like a week to week thing where it's like maybe one week it's like James Cook's really involved as a pass catcher and maybe one week it's the tight ends and it's like Knox gets like some run behind Kincaid. Maybe other weeks it'll be Gabe Davis and Khalil Shakir. So like I think that makes sense. I think your theme for the season has been funnel through Diggs, Kincaid, and Cook, and I think that's fair. And I think Kincaid at this point, I think he really is now the quote number 2 weapon in the passing game. I think he's taken that mantle.
I think if you look at the hierarchy of like targets, right? It's Diggs, it's Kincaid, and then it probably is game plan and game dependent, right? And the next three guys, one week it might be James Cook, another week it might be Khalil Shakir, another week it might be Gabriel Davis. But honestly, at this point, probably leaning Cook and Shakir because Gabriel Davis has been invisible as a receiver. But there's another point that I do want to point out. Charles G comes in and says, Gabe is important in the run game and as a vertical threat off script. He's a favorite of Josh. Doesn't mean they pay him, but he does bring value 100%. Gabriel Davis gets more snaps than any wide receiver on this football team on a weekly basis.
He had the most snaps in this game.
I don't think that changes, and I don't think that should change. I don't, right? Because after the game, and again, a lot of this is coach speak, and a lot of people might not want to hear what I'm about to say, but after the game, Joe Brady was asked, or this morning, Joe Brady was asked, like, who is the most valuable player on your offense? And his response was Gabriel Davis, just because of the way that Gabriel Davis has an effect on the way that the Buffalo Bills are able to run the ball and the way he's able to be like a pseudo tight end and pass block for this team. People don't want to hear that. Some people don't, right? Spin loves to hear it. He says Davis is also big in our run game, but it is important and it does have value. And I do think we let him walk in the offseason unless his box score statistics have plummeted so much to a point where he struggles to find a contract on the open market and he comes back here like a Jordan Poyer type of situation, right? I want a more explosive wide receiver number 2 in terms of I want a guy who can take the mantle from Stefon Diggs someday. I've been preaching that for 2 years now. But at the same time, the Buffalo Bills go out and add Malik Neighbors. The Buffalo Bills go out and add Keon Coleman. The Buffalo Bills go out and add Romeo Duze, right? They add one of those guys. Our wish has been granted.
Mm-hmm.
Our offense is still going to kind of struggle to figure out life without the wide receiver who's on the football field all the time and helping our run game, helping the pass block, all those various different things. Gabriel Davis will be missed. I don't think he's ever a wide receiver capable of taking the mantle from Stefon Diggs, but he will be missed when he is gone for a lot of reasons that go unnoticed.
Yeah, and that's going to be one of the big decisions of the offseason, right? Because clearly the contract didn't come before the season, and we don't know at this stage what may happen the rest of the year to potentially impact his future value, right? At this point, you might say the value of what you could have signed him for before the season is maybe relatively unchanged or even maybe a little lower. But that doesn't mean that it can't change. And if for some reason the Bills, right, go on a big run and they get into the playoffs and Gabe Davis has a big playoffs, like we've seen him have big games in the playoffs before, that could also impact his value in the offseason. So we'll see. I'm obviously getting a little bit of ahead of myself, but you are right. His impact one way or another will be felt whether he's here or not here.
A couple final things that I have for the offense. The offensive line was great. I thought they dominated the line of scrimmage against what is probably one of the best defensive lines in the National Football League. Deion Dawkins, those vibes were great, especially towards the end. I know he took a couple of penalties there, but the vibes were great. The emotion was there. Diggs and Davis were pretty much shut out in this game for the most part. Diggs only had 4 catches for 27 yards, but that didn't matter. And the Bills still got a ton of yards, and they still put up a ton of points without their wide receiver 1 and their wide receiver 2 really making an impact. So that shows some of the auxiliary weapons and the other weapons the Buffalo Bills have. And kudos to Josh Allen for getting the ball into the hands of Dalton Kincaid, James Cook, Ty Johnson, Khalil Shakir, all the other guys that he got the ball into the hands of. And the last thing, I really love this comment from Tracy Wolfson on Twitter. She's a CBS sideline reporter. Everyone just wants to make a big deal about Stefon Diggs, how he doesn't want to be here, how, this or that, he's a diva, that he's not going to be here next year. Me and Nate Burleson got it on Twitter. I'm sitting there trying to enjoy the Bills tailgate. I'm keyboard warrior fighting with Nate Burleson on social media yesterday. But Tracy Wolfson said all game Stefon was communicating with Allen, laughing and leading this offense. Just a different vibe down there today. I don't think people realize Stefon Diggs doesn't care about stats. Stefon Diggs cares about winning.
Yep.
That's what he cares about.
It's obvious,
he wants
right?
His team to win. And he's frustrated when they don't. I'm glad Stefon Diggs is here. I'm glad he's not going anywhere next year. And I'm glad there's finally one person in the national media who decide I'm going to go against this dumbass narrative that's created for easy clicks and Tracy Wolfson.
Yeah, and I mean, like, just you see how he reacts to losses, and you've seen how he's reacted to the big losses in the playoffs. Like that reaction is how we like kind of how we all feel as fans, right? Like we hate the losing. We want to win. That's clearly so important to him. And if you don't think it is, then I just don't know what to tell you, because that's clearly his number one objective.
All right, let's change our focus now to the Buffalo Bills defense. And I want to get into all the positive things the Buffalo Bills defense did, but we got to start with the injuries again. Like just an absolute mash unit. A number of injuries exiting this game for the Buffalo Bills defense. Teron Johnson and Dane Jackson are both in concussion protocol. I think one of the things that we learned about concussion protocol this year is we probably can't expect either of those guys to be available when we play the Eagles on Sunday. It would be a minor miracle. The one guy we got back this year was Terrell Bernard. We played on Monday Night Football. Cam Lewis with a shoulder injury late in that game. Micah Hyde, stinger aggravation, and Taylor Rapp was obviously taken out of the stadium in an ambulance. But before the game was even over, he was apparently at home and resting. Test came back negative, and there's a chance he could even play this week. Look, I expect Rapp and Cam Lewis probably to play. Like, this is something that we're going to have to monitor this whole week, the injury report, like we have been. But there's a chance that the injuries on defense are going to once again affect the way this 53-man roster looks. Because if Johnson, Jackson, Lewis, Hyde, and Rapp all miss this Eagles game, that leaves us with 7 healthy defensive backs, and that's with calling Josh Norman and Jamarcus Ingram up from the practice squad. So the Bills are going to have to make a 53-man roster change because 2 practice squad call-ups won't even cut it. Cornerbacks, Rasul Douglas, Christian Benford, nickel corner, Saran Neal, free safety, DeMar Hamlin, strong safety, Jordan Poyer, depth, Josh Norman, Jamarcus Ingram. That's what the Buffalo Bills will have to field if these guys can't come back from injury. That's why monitoring the injury report this week is going to be nerve-wracking, right? And the Buffalo Bills might have to make some 53-man changes. Guys like Jermaine Ifedi, guys like AJ Klein, they could find themselves like sitting on the couch for a week while the Buffalo Bills have to sign some guys. And they're not even a lot of safeties. There's no safeties on the practice squad. It's Kyron Brown, Herb Miller, and Trey Norwood outside Norman and Ingram. So it'll be really interesting to see how the Buffalo Bills maneuver and work the secondary this week. But just an absolute mash unit in that secondary. And the injury report is going to be nerve-wracking this week.
It's going to be nerve-wracking. You hope that at least, maybe 1 or 2 of those guys come out of that like less serious than the others.
And I kind of want to give Micah Hyde another week, like that stinger re-aggravation, that neck injury, the thing that kicked him out all of last year. It's like, man, we got a bye week in 2 weeks. I would love Micah Hyde to just sit this one out, right? Get 2 weeks rest. But I don't know if you can. If he's available, I don't know if you can.
If he's available, you probably can. And then that's the other thing, right? You've got this game against the Eagles. I know it's not a conference game, but it's like this can send you into the bye on a trajectory that sets you up for the rest of the year. Now, obviously, you're not going to put the player in harm's way, right? If he can't play, he's not going to play. But it's just a tough situation, right? It's not a situation where like you're playing the Jets again this week and you could afford to probably be without a lot of these guys. Like, this is a big game. The Eagles right now are struggling a bit against the Chiefs tonight, but like you don't want to go into that game and have to go against, Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, like without some of those key guys in the secondary, right? So, man, let's hope that the injury report, let's hope there's a lot of limiteds, I guess, on the first day. Like that's what you're hoping for. You're hoping if there's some limiteds on the first day, that's a good sign. DNPs to start the week, not great. Limiteds on the first day generally is a decent sign.
And Bill's chat pod made a great comment too. Like even if Cam Lewis is healthy, a team that is so run heavy in Philadelphia, maybe we see a guy like Saran Neal actually be the starting nickel cornerback in
Yeah,
that
very
game.
cool.
So that'll be something interesting to keep an eye on as well. All right, to the field where the Buffalo Bills had a really good game on defense, right? 155 total yards surrendered, 2.9 yards per play, 4 turnovers, 6 sacks, only 23 minutes time of possession for the New York Jets. Only 54 total plays were run. They were 0 of 11, on third down. I get the Jets offense is bad, that Zach Wilson is now a bench for Tim freaking Boyle, that Nathaniel Hackett is literally the worst play caller in the history of football, worse than Matt Canada. I get all that. Still an impressive performance from this defense, because especially the panic attacks we were having on the pregame show.
Panic has 0 for 11 on third down. Obviously, but how about this? This is a wild stat to me from this game. The Jets were 2.9 yards per play. You said right. 2.6 yards per pass play. So their yards per pass play was actually lower than their average yards per play. They were 3.5 per rush, but 2.6 per pass. Like I gotta check and see if that's like the lowest of any team this season. Like that is absurdly bad.
There was a point there, so they keep the stats on the scoreboard in the stadium and the yardage stats. And there was like for most of the first quarter, the Jets were negative 9 yards passing with all the sacks. And then like towards the end of the first quarter, early the second quarter, they got to 0. And there was like a mock cheer from the crowd that they got to 0 passing yards. So
Goodness.
Zach Wilson bench. Tim Boyle is now the starter, and Trevor Siemian is now the backup. Zach Wilson's been moved to third string. So I don't know who made that decision to play him for so long, whether it was an ownership thing or what, but that was a awful decision to keep him there for as long as they did. All right, let's talk about individual players, and let's give out some flowers here. Who are some guys that you want to shout out on this defense today? Because there were a number of guys to choose from.
Yeah. I'll kind of go podium style, and I'll go my honorable mention will be Terrell Bernard. He was my take me higher player of the game. Obviously, he was like all over the field, and I'm just giving him a shout out because I think he was good in run support, half sack. But my podium will go Leonard Floyd. I keep talking about him. He obviously had a huge game as well. Just incredible the amount of contribution he's made. 2.5 sacks in this game, 2 tackles for loss, brings him up to 9.5 sacks on the season. We thought he could be the guy to kind of bridge the gap until Von Miller came back, but he's the dude right now. He is the dude right now. Like he's the guy.
That's really in my notes. What we envisioned for Vaughn. That's what I have in my notes.
Right. So second on the podium, like moving up to the second spot, I'll give it to Ed Lasso, as you put on. The dude is just playing out of his mind. And look, I mean, not necessarily like the box score stuffer, right? In this game, he did have a sack and a TFL, only 3 tackles, but man, he was sniffing out screens.
Yeah.
He was all over the field. He was creating really just like negative first down run plays for the Jets. And when I say negative, I mean like no gain or even negative. I mean, he was just physically dominant, but also I feel like mentally he was dominant in this game as well. Like he knew where to be, he knew what to do. And so he's my second on the podium. And number 1 is Rasul Douglas, the trade deadline acquisition, the 2 interceptions, the ball skills, the instincts, the awareness. This is a guy that you gave up a 3rd round pick, got a 5th round pick back for, playing at the level of a CB1. Him paired with Benford, and obviously Jackson got banged up a little bit in this game, but we'll see. I think he ended up being fine, if I'm not mistaken. But Rasul Douglas, really, like, I think he's going to enter. He could enter next season with the Bills as their CB1, given this injury situation with Trey White. Yeah. And he is looking like he is a fantastic trade deadline acquisition. Like a lot of people
just the
perfect fit. I mean, that's the thing. Like he's the perfect fit, and what the Bills desperately needed, which were guys who can make a guy who can make a play on the ball skills. He is the fit. So for me, that's my podium. And Douglas at the top, man, guy had a great game, and I'm really happy for him.
Yeah, 2 interceptions, that fumble recovery. The Buffalo Bills, the state that their defense is currently in, they need turnovers. And that right there, they went out and got a guy who's known for creating turnovers. And he has lived up thus far to the hype. And you're right. Like, this is a guy now who I think fits in, not just for the rest of this year. And even though his contract is kind of tough next year, it'll have to be restructured. He's a guy who's probably going to be a part of the future of this football team. And honestly, um, again, I have to run this by some people smarter than me, but the way he plays football, right? As he gets older, I don't know. There was a nickel corner from Green Bay that we picked up in 2017 that transitioned quite well to safety. I wonder if maybe that's some. I'm not saying like next year or the year after, but once he starts to get on like the into the 30s, which is in a couple of years, I think maybe Rasul Douglas is a guy who could be a transition type in a Sean McDermott defense. So lock this guy up long term, play him at corner for a couple more years, and then move him out to pasture at safety. Who knows? Maybe that's something you can consider with Rasul Douglas. You mentioned Terrell Bernard, our guy Kevin Masseri. He's got this new Built in Buffalo podcast, the Going Deep Pod. He laid out the stats, right, for Terrell Bernard on the year compared to Tremaine Edmonds. And there are a lot of people on Bills Mafia who are going to be excited to hear these statistics up against one another. On the year, Terrell Bernard's stat line is insane, right? 95 tackles, 3.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 2 interceptions, 4 pass defenses, and 9.5 run stops. Compared to Tremaine Edmonds, 77 tackles, 0 sacks, 77 tackles, 0 sacks, 2 interceptions, 4 pass defense, and 5 run stops. So Terrell Bernard is just, excuse me, absolutely outplaying Tremaine Edmonds in Chicago. And you're going to take over because my voice is shot here.
Hey, Tremaine Edmonds finally made a splash play for the Bears, although they did lose. So, look, I love Tremaine, but Terrell Bernard, I mean, the traits were there for him to be an asset to this defense. We weren't sure if he was going to simply step in and play that Tremaine Edmonds role, but the Bills, I mean, largely they're playing the same defense, but they're actually just like using Terrell Bernard. He's just more instinctual, I feel like, than Tremaine Edmonds. So those instincts to me have more than made up for the lack of size, and he's still got the athleticism, right? The sideline to sideline speed. He's got the ability to blitz. He's a more effective blitzer than Tremaine Edmonds. It just seems like he knows how to use. This is going to sound like not. I don't want this to sound creepy, but he knows how to use his body better than Tremaine Edmonds did. I mean, Tremaine Edmonds was an athlete, but I don't know that he really knew or had like the wherewithal to use his body to the best of his ability. And I feel like Terrell Bernard does that.
Yeah, looking at this Buffalo Bills defense too, you're seeing a changing of the guard really in terms of like some of the impact players too. Like in the past, the playmakers on this defense were Matt Milano, who's obviously no longer on the defense because of injuries, Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, and those two don't make as many plays as they used to make because of injuries, and Trey White, who's not on the field because of injuries. You're starting to see a transition, and the playmakers on this team now are Ed Oliver, Terrell Bernard, Rasul Douglas. So you're starting to see sort of an influx, Leonard Floyd. You're starting to see an influx of playmakers, and some of these guys coming up big week after week. Ed Oliver, Leonard Floyd, Terrell Bernard. They're keeping this defense afloat despite just an insane amount of injuries. So a credit to those guys, plus now a fourth guy in Rasul Douglas, and I think another really big piece in Linval Joseph as well, sort of just helping free everyone else up to be successful. One name that I have to mention because I have shat on him for 2 years.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Tyrel Dodson, right?
Yeah.
First of all, he was an energy flow like this entire game. The energy that he brought the entire football game was absolutely incredible. Just the way he was hyping everyone up, just the way he was flying around the football field. He had a sack, he had a tackle for loss, he had a quarterback hit, he had a forced fumble, he had 7 tackles. absolutely incredible game for Tyrell Dodson. I don't want to rain on his parade because it was a great game, but I will say this. I think against a team like the New York Jets, a guy like Tyrell Dodson is sorely needed. A team that's going to run the ball, a team that's not very advanced in terms of passing the football. I don't mean this as an insult at all. I told my dad during the game, I was like, man, if Tyrell Dodson was born in 1996, he'd be a Hall of Famer. They'd be lining him up for a golden jacket because his game fits the old school football so much. So he had his best game ever. I applaud it. I question whether, and I think it'll be valuable against a team like Philadelphia next week too, who can run the ball really well. I question whether that kind of game holds up against a pass happy attack. Like I question whether he can recreate that against Kansas City. Right. I question whether he could recreate that against the LA Chargers. Like some of the other teams that pass the ball a little bit more. So kudos to him. I'm going to give him his flowers. He played well. I just don't know how sustainable that is, but what a value he was in this football game.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't been the biggest, we haven't been the nicest, I would say, to him, but I'll give him credit.
I mean, and not so much you, it's really me. So
I'll give him credit where credit's due. But again, like considering the opponent, I mean, I said in the pregame too, you were asking me about in the pregame whether or not like, this was better suited for Dorian Williams or Tyrell Dodson. I kind of said it didn't really matter. And I tended to agree that like it was a good matchup if Dodson was going to be the guy, and he did play well. So I'll give him that credit.
A couple of other comments. Post Mafia says over the last 2 weeks, Groot has not come out for pregame warmups, never missed before. And then Ralph Wilson Sr., Groot's playing through an injury, and he's still playing relatively well. So here's a guy gutting it out for his team.
Needs that bye week. He needs that bye week.
Yeah, I think that Rousseau's. I don't have the box score statistics for him in front of me. I guarantee you they're probably going to be lower this year than people would like. And there will be like a national narrative. Not that people talk about Groot, right? But like if you were to ask like Michael Irvin his thoughts on Groot or Stephen A. Smith his thoughts on Groot, they would Google his ESPN stat line and they would be like, what a bust, right? I almost like anything he does this year that's good, and him going out there and gutting and making plays, I applaud it. And I'm really not holding too much of the lack of production against him, because I really do think he's playing through a pretty significant injury. So shout out to Groot. I think he is a cornerstone player for this defense for years to come.
Yeah, he may be our Joe Burrow. There's just like playing through an injury that we're not really reporting. So, I mean, he is on the injury report during the week. So, and Shaq did play well, had a nice sack early in the game. So that was nice as well.
And that's the last point for this defense really is I didn't have a chance to look at the snap counts this morning, but just being there in person, Von Miller was not playing when the game
16 snaps for Von Miller.
Yeah, he was rarely playing when the game mattered. Like the Buffalo Bills made a conscious decision, like we can't trot him out on the field when it matters anymore. And a couple people mentioned in the comment section he gets the knee brace removed in a couple of weeks. I know a lot of people at Cover One are adamant supporters, and they're like, it's going to take time. We might not even see Von Miller be Von Miller again until 2024. I'm not mad. I'm just kind of disappointed, right? Like, so I'm not going to hold that too much against him. But I think the Buffalo Bills have made a wise decision. It was a decision that on social media I called for earlier this week, and we talked about in the pregame show. He shouldn't be playing in snaps that matter because he's costing this football team. And the Buffalo Bills, it appears, have finally made that decision too. Yeah,
they made that decision. He played 16 snaps. Next week, which looks like, the Eagles are a pretty run first approach team, might not get a ton of snaps next week either. So get them into that bye, continuing to ramp up. And then look, after the bye, that's when things, you really hope to start to see some improvement, right? We may not see an above average Von Miller in 2023, but if we can see some incremental improvement and things kind of get better towards the end of the season, then at least that gives you some optimism for next year. And I'm not saying he's done for he's not going to contribute this year, but like he doesn't look like he's going to get back to that closer type form this year.
It looks like one of those things where like the light bulb could just come on at any moment, right? And when it does, I think it'll stay lit. But We're just waiting for that light bulb to come on. All right, on to special teams now. We've kind of hinted at and brushed over and talked about over the course of the show, so we won't talk about it too much. But Tyler Bass, outside the extra point miss, he looked really good. Sam Martin still looks bad. I know he had one inside the 10, but it should have been like inside the 5, right? And obviously Reggie Gilly made that huge play to start the game. So it was a decent day from special teams, but there were a couple of errors here and there.
Yeah, Sam Martin struggling a bit the last couple games, but overall,
we'll get to that too. My bad.
Yeah, the fake punt from the Jets, didn't love that. Look, I mean, Tyler Bass kicked well, but I do think generally, I haven't been impressed with the special teams play this year from the Bills, in the return game. I mean, at least in this game, at least they didn't try to bring any kicks out, which I thought was like an improvement. It's just sad. But Sam Martin has struggled, and I also would say they probably had their best game on kick coverage this week, but they did still give up a decent return on that third return. But look, overall, the Bills special teams unit is average, like, at best, I would say. And that's just what we're going to have to live with, I think, the rest of the year. You hope that the kicking operation remains sound, which it has. And that's really probably going to end up being hopefully the most important thing when it comes to special teams, but have not been impressed with Sam Martin's punting the last few weeks. And
the Bills should bring in some punters for workouts. Send a message. Like, sign a guy to the practice squad. Like, let him know that, like, this is not acceptable. Like, send a message. The fake. I wanted to talk about the fake real quick because I was in person, right? I was in the stadium. And I literally turned to the people next to me when we were in the stadium. And I said, this is going to be a fake. I said it before they even ran it. I was like, this is going to be a fake. And then the fake happened and they just picked up a first down. And everyone looked at me like, how? Like, how did you know that? Dude, I don't know how the Bills coaching staff did not catch that this was going to be a fake because the New York Jets made it clear as day what they were going to do on that play. Like, it was the 2-minute warning. They called their entire unit over, and Brant Boyer was literally just giving a fiery, elongated speech to the special teams unit. Like, it was clear that they were doing something that they weren't typically doing. Then they come back out onto the field, and they huddle again without Morstead before they get into formation. Then Morstead comes running out onto the field late because the special teams coach was talking to him. Literally, like, they were just telegraphing what they were going to do. On top of that, their offense has no pulse. On top of that, their season's over if they lose this game. They're 2 games below 5. Like, every single reason why you would say a punt was coming, or a fake punt was coming, happened. I'm sitting there like, it's going to be a fake. And the Bills just looked absolutely befuddled by the fact that the New York Jets would even attempt it. There were no people motioning. There were no people pointing anything out. They were kind of just la-di-da walking up like it was any other punt when it was just clear as day that it was not going to be. I was pretty heated after that. And I was really disappointed in the coaching staff for not seeing that one coming.
Yeah. And that's a thing where against better teams, like, that's going to matter more. Right. And so obviously it was kind of ended up being inconsequential in this game, but, like, again, that's why I'll keep saying I'm, like, not that impressed with the Bills special teams this year. And, like, that really should not be a reason that you potentially lose a game when it comes into some of these really important games. And I'm going to be really upset if it does end up being a factor here in this next couple stretch of games.
All right. Before we head out of here today, we're going to talk a little bit Bills, Eagles. But before that, a couple of words here from our guys over at the Cover One Buffalo podcast.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
All right. The Buffalo Bills have the Philadelphia Eagles next week in Philadelphia. I think my favorite quote from Sean McDermott during today's press conference was one of the reporters said, "Hey, you're going home." And Sean McDermott said, "No, I'm not." Right? Like my dad and my brother, they might live in Philadelphia, right? My family might live in Philadelphia. My home is Buffalo, New York. So it was a really nice comment from Sean McDermott during his opening press conference today. Listen, I know that they're losing right now to the Chiefs 17-7, I think is what's been pointed out to me in the comment section, but this is the most physical football team we're going to see this year outside of the New York Jets on one side of the ball. We're going to see it this week on both sides of the ball from the Philadelphia Eagles in the trenches. So this is another game where energy and vibes are quite frankly important, because if you can't match the intensity and the physicality with which the Philadelphia Eagles play football, you don't stand a chance in hell.
Yeah, Philadelphia Eagles pride themselves on the trenches. They're one of the better running teams in the NFL. They're the number one rush defense in the NFL, giving up the fewest yards per game on the ground. Still one of the top offenses in the NFL overall, fifth overall offense in the league yards per game wise. They're struggling a bit tonight. But also Jalen Hurts still looks like he's bothered a bit by that knee injury. He hasn't been himself. So the Bills, ultimately, this is going to be a trenches game, and the Eagles will have the advantage, but the Eagles can be thrown on. So if you're looking for at least a preliminary matchup to kind of focus on where the Bills have an advantage, is that the Eagles have been susceptible to the pass. They're bottom tier in pass defense overall in the season. So look, Bills have another opportunity in front of them. It's going to be on the road. Philadelphia is a tough place to play. We know their fans are crazy as well. So Pop says if Eagles lose the Chiefs, they're going to come out mad with something to prove next week. That's true. And certainly, obviously, rooting for them to win tonight anyway. But yeah, that's going to be a tough game.
Yeah, Claude Puig comes in and says Bills got to keep the Eagles out of third and short, so we get to see the tush push for the first time next week if the Eagles get into those situations. But do the Buffalo Bills have the sort of antidote or the kryptonite for the tush push? You have Linval Joseph, this mammoth of a human, right? Who not only is a mammoth of a human, but also is a mammoth of a human who's seen the tush push in practice on a regular basis. Maybe he's got some secrets. Maybe he's got the secret sauce for how to shut down the tush push. And you mentioned Jalen Hurts' knee injury. Who knows how often maybe they even go to the tush push, because Jalen Hurts and the fact that he can squat like 10,000 pounds is part of the reason why that play is so successful. But I have in my show notes here, it'll be really interesting to see. You mentioned the Eagles are susceptible to the pass. We applauded Joe Brady for his balance on offense this week and how much the Buffalo Bills ran the ball. We did not like the balance that we had a couple of weeks ago against the Bengals when we got down and we just stopped running, right? It'll be interesting to see what the balance looks like on Sunday against the Philadelphia Eagles, who are so good against the run and are susceptible against the pass. It'll be really interesting to see where the Bills lean into, what try to kind of balance they try to create. If they try to run the ball early and get stonewalled, do they go away from it? All of those things will be interesting to watch to see how Joe Brady reacts.
And I think that, the Chiefs are demonstrating that tonight, right? They're up 17-7. They're playing a game where they didn't necessarily try to come out and just blow the doors off. And Isaiah Pacheco has over 80 rushing yards tonight on 14 attempts. So to me, like the running game for the Bills, like the style, I think that could be like this is the game where I think if you're going to try to get Leonard Fournette up and ready, like this could be the type of game that he would do well in. But it will be interesting, right? Because also, you don't necessarily want to take away from potentially using again Cook and even Ty Johnson in the passing game. So we'll see. And Walter says Howell threw all over the yard in them twice. They are like, they can be thrown against for sure.
And here's the thing. If Walter S is pointing this out and Walter S has seen this, you know who else has seen this? Josh Allen. So this is, while Joe Brady and how they balance the run to the pass is going to be interesting to watch. How Josh Allen reacts in heading into this game is going to be interesting to watch, because him staying on the sideline on back, him not being afraid to take the underneath stuff, him taking his first read more often, him not making really any bad passes outside of that one pass that he made, one, turnover worthy plays, and that does that go away because Josh Allen's seen Sam Howell throw the ball over the yard. Does Josh Allen come out there, sugar high Josh, try to recreate that, try to throw the ball over the yard? And if he does he get himself into trouble? So it'll be interesting to see what kind of control and balance Josh Allen can find in this game against the Philadelphia Eagles. This might be a test because they still got some dudes in that secondary, like named players who, are capable of turning the ball over. So forcing turning the ball over. So it'll be really interesting to watch. And then the last thing I have in my notes here, easier said than done, but you need to create an unbalanced offense for them, right? You need to shut down the run and force Jalen Hurts to be a quarterback. Not as easy to do as just saying it. You have to actually go out there and beat that team with Kelsey and Lane Johnson and all those big uglies up there in the trenches. But you have no Dallas Goedert. I feel a little bit more comfortable with our secondary with a guy like Rasul Douglas being able to cover a guy like A.J. Brown. You obviously still have Devontae Smith you got to deal with, but if the Philadelphia Eagles beat us next week, I'd rather have them doing it passing than running.
Yeah, I mean, they have great offensive line. DeAndre Swift's been really solid for them this year. A nice get for them. But I do think that the Bills can do enough, right, to slow the run game down. The Chiefs are doing a pretty good job against Swift tonight. I know they had that first drive where they kind of went down, but like since that drive, they've kind of shut it down. It's going to come down to the Bills playing another solid game up front, right? This defensive line needs to come to play. Ed Oliver needs to continue that trend of playing elite football. Linval Joseph in the middle as well. Our guys that we rely on to set the edge in the run game: Lloyd, Lawson, Floyd. I should have said Floyd. I don't know why I said Lloyd. But yeah, that's going to be important in this one. And yeah, it'll be a tough test for the Bills, especially on the road, but it's a good, it's potentially a game to, I don't want to say go all out in before the bye because we don't know what the injury situation is going to look like, but a good game, another big important game for momentum, right? You want to go into that bye week. Obviously you want to go in there at 7-5. And if you can, go on a run after the bye, and you never know what could happen.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here on the Air Raid Hour. As always, we look forward to these post-game shows, whether they're therapy sessions or they're like tonight when we have some good things to talk about. So before we head out of here, Dave, any last and final thoughts?
No, just nice. I put in the show description. It was nice to have an overly positive game recap. Like our wins in the last month or so, they've been a little a little uncomfortable even with some of those wins, but it was nice to have a I'll call it 99% positive recap for tonight's show.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We will be back on Sunday morning with our Bills-Eagles pregame show. I will be no longer in my mother's basement and back into the West Coast studio here at the Air Raid
I like
Hour.
the basement.
Yeah, this is a good look for me. I've been a little bit looser too because I get the old paper notes. Only got one computer. I don't have 6 lights blaring in my face. So this has been oddly cathartic. A couple of shows here. Just feel like I'm just on a Zoom call. So that was nice. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. You could always help us out by clicking that share button, copying the link, sending it to anyone you think would appreciate this show. Obviously, smashing that like helps a lot. Leaving a comment in the comment section after the video is over helps as well. So any thoughts you have on the game, any comments, kind words, criticisms, we accept criticism as well, right? Anything you think we can do to improve, Leave those comments in the comment section. Helps us. And as always, we would not be the show that we are without you guys. You guys are the third host of this show. We truly appreciate the comments that you guys leave in the comment section, and you truly make this show what it is. And happy Thanksgiving. That's a good one. How is it that I don't realize there's football again in 3 days? I didn't even realize that. And my mom will not be making an appearance, by the way. She's asleep. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. Until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comment section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!